Hey future and fellow OTs, welcome back to my channel. I'm Talia, and in today's video, by your request, we're going to be talking about some goals you might come across in the pediatric setting. And no, Jacob, that's not feet, that's talking about children and teens. So let's get into it. Okay, time for my little disclaimer. As a new grad occupational therapist, I'm sure I haven't even come across half the things that might present to a generalist OT, and I might not be covering the specialist areas in pediatrics. This is just from my experience for 6 months working as a generalist pediatric OT. Number one, handwriting. If you didn't know, that can be a big area of OT work in pediatrics. Handwriting can be addressed and worked on, and there can be concerns in various different areas, and today I'm just wanting to give an overview of all these different goals. So to be brief, there can be issues or problems identified with the way the child or the teen is maybe holding their pencil, the way they form their letters. Typically for each letter, when considering, for example, the Queensland font or handwriting style, there's a particular stroke order that we tend to teach and follow. So if a child presents where they're forming letters and they're illegible or just seem maybe like there could be potentially a better way to do it and the child is interested in changing that, then that can be something you work on. Also, there's letter spacing, so between the letters inside a word and then between words themselves. So sometimes you'll have kids, and even adults I'm sure, that their writing will be all in one line and you're not really sure where each word stops and starts. Letter line placement, so the letters might just be kind of on a roller coaster going up and down the page, slanting. I'm sure there's many things I'm missing right now, but within handwriting there can be a lot going on, and that's definitely something we assessed and inquired about during our assessment intake process. I wasn't a big fan of working on pencil grips unless there seemed to be a reason, or the child was in pain, or it really appeared to be hindering their performance and ability to engage in handwriting tasks. I don't personally hold my pencil or my pen in the specific way that we aim for. So just considering that, and I think there has been some discussion around after a certain age, I'm not sure what it was, 9, 10, if their grip is functional and not causing them pain, and they are able to participate and create handwriting works that are appropriate to the quality and the performance that's expected of them, etc, etc, and the child or the teen really doesn't have an interest or motivation to modify their grip, then I'm kind of the side that we might not need to use it as a goal or work towards it. If it's not causing them pain, if it's not really affecting their performance, if it's not something meaningful to them that they want to work towards, then I'm less likely to go, hey, let's work on our pencil grip. Hopefully that makes sense. Enough about handwriting. So following on from handwriting, this can link into general goals around fine motor and just development of hand skills, coordination, strength, all those things throughout the lifespan. So considering hands and grips for a moment, as we age, we are working through different stages of grips, and this can include from when we're about 1 to 1.5 to, I'll put it up on the screen, but from my memory, working on cylindrical grasp, and then we'll transition into digital grasp from 2 to 3, and then we're moving on to this tripod grasp that we're working on usually in therapy, and the ultimate I think that we usually are trying to work towards is dynamic tripod grasp, which I do not use personally. So if we notice kids who are say 5, 6, 7 still using grasps we would consider to be more of ages below their current age, then that might be something where we step in and look at, like, you might hear opening up the web space, or all these little things with hands we can work on to help them to strengthen their hands and start using different grasps that are developmentally appropriate, and that can help them engage in the functional tasks they need to. So this then can lead into more functional goals that you might come across, which might be buttons, shoelaces, the handwriting we said before. Just think about the different things you have to do every day and that a child would need to do that needs this kind of dexterity and strength and coordination of our fingers, and that might present as a parent's concern or a teacher's concern. You know, they have trouble with scissors. That's actually something else we work on a lot. Well, I worked on a lot, was scissor coordination and all those sorts of things. So it can start with just how they hold their scissors can be the first step. It's then helping them to develop their strength and their coordination and their ability to use both hands at the same time to, you know, helper hands turning the paper and the scissor hands holding the scissors. And it's something you need to do and coordinate both hands for. So following along, I guess, with those goals, you can consider them school-based goals. So you might also come across difficulties with attention and concentration. You might have kids present who have diagnosed ADHD or ADD, and for a lot of that, it can be making them more aware of their self-regulation and giving them more motivators to try and stay on task and concentrate as best as possible for them. But a lot of it might be just speaking with the people who are important in their life, so their parents, so their family, and their teachers, and there might be other people, but trying to make maybe task adaptations or environmental adaptations that can support that child to participate to their best. So that might be giving them different breaks or giving them different types of instructions, or the way they communicate instructions. You might have multiple modalities. So there might be verbal instructions, it might be having some visual, it might be keeping it up on the board for longer instead of just saying it once. There might be rewards, there might be the magic hoop. If you guys remember the magic hoop from, I think I talked about it when I was on placement. That's something I definitely use in my therapy sessions to help them keep aware, but also praise their improvements and their noticing of their behavior. That wasn't a very articulate way to say it, but their ability to self-regulate and check in with how they're going. And we also used the on-task target. So are we on task right now? Are we talking about something else? Have you left your seat? Do you need a movement break? So helping them to kind of check in with what they need and what's going on for them, I found was helpful. Toileting is another area of pediatrics. I found there can be different areas and parts of toileting that you might need to work on with kids and teenagers. So one of the things that came up for me a lot when working with my kids was difficulty with wiping. Now, we don't really, well, I didn't learn this in uni, so it was a bit of, oh, I get to work on this. But ultimately it was quite rewarding when we did make that progress, and we did, yeah, make progress. That was the rewarding part, and you're gonna get to go home and be like, I worked on toileting today. It might sound a bit weird, but you end up kind of getting into it, and we found as OTs, we started just talking about toileting a lot, and then people around us who weren't OTs going, oh my goodness, but nah, it's the job. So within toileting, there can be lots of different things. There can be perhaps sensory issues into children not liking or being afraid of the sensations of going to the toilet. There can be problems around not having the sensations of needing to go to the toilet, if that makes sense. There can be issues around difficulties with wiping. There can be anxieties around going to the bathroom that may be associated to those first few things I talked about, or different, maybe negative experiences they've had. So a big part of working on toileting and the goal setting stage is, you know, figuring out what exactly is going on, as you would for every goal, but what exactly is going on for this child, what's happening in their environment, including social environment, parents, childcare, educators, everyone. Is everyone being supportive? Is there something that's just kind of going wrong? Is there something that's kind of just going wrong in this environment? How's the toilet set up? Is it right for their height, their stage of development, all these things? Another more general one was self-care and self-care motivation. But when it came to motivation, it might present as, oh, he never showers, or he never wants to brush his teeth, I'm just yelling at him all the time, and he might brush his teeth once a week. It's like, oh goodness, all right, well, we want to improve that, or once a month, or he's having a shower once a month. What's going on? That this is what's happening at the moment. What is our current approach? What's already been tried? What's helpful? Considering all these things kind of before we jump into being like, hey, you should shower more. So some of the things that might come up are sensory things. So for some kids and some adults, anyone, our sensory preferences are different. Well, for everyone they're different, but for some people the sensations of brushing their teeth, like something on their teeth, water on their face, the sounds of an exhaust fan, the sounds of all these different sensory information can be a negative experience for some people and some kids. So it's trying to work out, could it be something in that realm of the sensory environment? Or could it be motivation and lack of understanding? Could it be needing to kind of link it to something socially, where, oh, like doing a social story where showering or brushing our teeth can help us make friends, or we need to do it for our bodies to keep ourselves healthy. If it's something more related to intrinsic motivation, it's trying to figure out what is motivating or what is going to be motivating for them and helping them then get into the habit of it. And that's just my experience. I'm sure there can be many other things related to self-care, motivation, and sensory preferences. Spatial awareness was something else that came up, and body coordination and gross motor coordination, strength, balance, all these things can come up as well, especially if you're not working within a multidisciplinary environment or you don't have a physiotherapist around. Sometimes we did take on these kind of roles, and working on core strength at times and working on spatial awareness was something I really enjoyed. And one of the ways I worked on that was through dance, because it was something motivating for my client, and it was giving us an opportunity to look at where our bodies were in space and utilize the mirrors we had available to us to work towards this goal. But there's plenty of ways that you can work on spatial awareness. Something else that might present is rigidity and difficulties with flexible thinking. So this might be more typical with kids who are presenting on a background of ASD, autism. And so there are different programs we would use, such as Superflex, and more concrete examples to just try and make it more understandable to the child. So sometimes I heard of other clinicians using the paddle pop stick, you know, when we get really stuck and rigid and we just break. Sometimes we need to be a bit more like bendy, like I'm not sure what she used, maybe Play-Doh or a straw. And yeah, so that can be something else that parents want to work on. And when it comes to social skills and communication and thinking flexibly and even moving into emotional literacy, this is something where we kind of seem to cross over with speech pathologists. So it's understanding, if they're seeing a speech pathologist as well, what they might already be working on, or if they're not, talking to them about what might it take for this child to need an assessment with you, or what signs or behaviors or things should I look out for to know when I should be referring to you, or get both of us involved. And a big thing around that is just communication. So I was lucky enough to work in a practice where it was both speechies and OTs, and we'd often be seeing the same clients. So we were continuously talking about what we were working on, and sometimes we were overlapping, and sometimes that is okay because it's reinforcing the same points and goals that we're working towards. So just making sure you have that communication around that. So other things that might present is difficulties in friendships, social skills, and that might come back to language and social communication, and it might come back to as well emotional literacy and emotional regulation, also social problem solving. There can be a lot going on in friendships. There's a lot going on. So some of the things we would work towards in emotional literacy, emotional regulation, are things like being able to identify emotions in others, being able to identify them in ourselves, labeling them, so giving words to emotions, especially for younger kids and even older kids who are struggling with this. Helping them give language to how they're feeling and how others are feeling can really help and be some of the first steps in this process. And then something else we'd work towards is we'd have parents coming in or carers coming in saying they keep blowing up over such small things. You know, they had sand in their shoe and they threw like a whole meltdown in the store. I said they couldn't have something today, but maybe next time, and they had a tantrum in the store. And so helping the child to firstly understand their emotions and what's going on inside of their bodies, and teaching them more about body clues when I'm feeling angry, anxious, so they can start to understand when it's coming on. Oh, I'm starting to feel anxious, I'm starting to feel angry. And it can be then working on strategies. Oh, what can we do when we start to feel angry or anxious? So body mapping, starting to do some strategies, calming strategies with them. But a big thing I like to do was size of the problem. So looking at different situations and problems that happen in our lives and what size are they, and are they massive, and then or are they small, things that we can solve by ourselves. And then the next step was working on the size of the reactions. So we'd watch videos of other people reacting, or we would act out different things, and we'd read scenarios and we'd see, did their reaction match the size of the problem? And so then we'd work on that and move it on into their own lives. This is something I want to make more into a standalone video, how we might work on emotional regulation in all these areas. So if there's a particular goal So if there's a particular area I talk about today or goal that you want to learn more about, let me know in the comments and I can make a more detailed video about that topic. So as we've already said, sensory processing can be an area that presents, and parents usually don't really know that that's what's causing the behaviors of, he never has shoes on, he really hates having a bath, he just refuses. So it can be kind of hidden in these day-to-day functional issues of children not wanting to do behaviors, or children seeking out movement or seeking out sensations that's not considered socially appropriate. So it can be a lot of education to the parents and environmental adaptations, and trying to, if it's sensory seeking behaviors, so they're craving perhaps more movement or more touch input or more sound, it's helping them to provide more opportunities for these sensations in their day-to-day activities in school, so that within a day they're hopefully getting as much of that input as they need to be functional and regulated and on task and all those great things. But a big part of it for me has been, educating parents around what this means, who their child is, that we're all different, there's nothing wrong with us, that the sensory profile is not diagnosing anything, to me anyway, it's not diagnosing anything, it's just giving us an idea of how best we can support your child or your teenager and what they need to be most successful in each of their environments. I'm jumping all over the place, but road safety was something else we worked on. That was a lot of fun. I definitely did see some progress. I did see progress in road safety. Our practice even ran road safety groups. I never got to see one, but I'm sure they would have been quite beneficial. And just that they were able to run a group shows that there's lots of kids that might need a little bit more help, or could benefit from a little bit more help in road safety. Executive functioning and cognition. So within this, there's lots of things going on. For example, organization and memory, and this can come up at school, it can come up in home. They seem really unorganized. They don't seem to really be thinking logically, might be something a parent says. So it's figuring out what parts of executive functioning. I'll try and put something on the screen to show the many different aspects to executive functioning. What's going on? What are our strengths and what are some areas we can work on? Something else that might come out of this is difficulty with routines. Morning routines, bedtime routines, transitioning between activities. So especially for little kids, transitioning, and even older kids, transitioning between activities can be a big concern for parents. For example, moving from playing to dinner time, moving from task to task in classroom. They get really stuck and they don't want to move and they get very upset. And so that can be something we work on in sessions as well as routines. So this can be at home routines. And I really enjoyed that, because one of the things I would do for that is developing, for an older child usually, a routine with them, and then help me design it on the computer, and it would be something that they can interact with, and it reminds them of all the steps they need to do. And I had a lot of great feedback from parents saying it really helped them see what they hadn't done yet, and it was like a motivator to show what they had done already. And so routines, just to keep it short, routines. So something else that was really introduced to me in my first job that OTs can play a part in is feeding. Now, I don't have a lot of knowledge about feeding, and I don't necessarily feel super confident about working with feeding, but I did have some exposure to it, and it was definitely something where I was drawing from the knowledge of speech, from the speechies, so the speech pathologists, and really trying to learn about our role as OTs in this area of feeding. So from what I understand, and it's limited at the moment, so bear with me, is our role can be around, you know, those family routines, the environment, considering those sensory sensitivities, aversions, and just the whole sensory all the sensory preferences at the same time. And so part of the work I would do was considering what foods they already eat, what aversions they have, and trying to identify, is there a pattern? Is it a certain texture? Is it a certain temperature? Is it mixing of foods? There can be lots of things going on, or potentially going on, for why a child refuses to eat new foods or different foods and prefers a perhaps more bland diet or the same things over and over again. And so then one of the things we might work on is sensory play. So really getting them touching and introducing them to new textures and new things in a fun, safe, comfortable, calm environment. It can be quite anxiety provoking at meal times for a child, especially if the parent doesn't understand what's going on, and for them it can feel quite frustrating and quite anxious. Meal times might be. So for everyone, it's kind of helping them all to have a more enjoyable time at mealtime and helping them explore foods in a more fun and comfortable way. Something else that I came across that I ended up helping with was early learning skills. If we came across children who seem to be quite delayed in early learning skills, as well as communication, things like that, that's what I'd be working on with the speech pathologist. And I was working on colors, numbers, things like that, and I would just dot that throughout what I was doing, as well as if that was our main goals, that would be purely what I was doing in some sessions. But that was then also working on their fine motor skills, their communication as well, and all these things can be worked on all at once. But those are some goals that I have worked on as well. Have I talked about shoelaces? Tying shoes was another big one. So yeah, tying shoes. School motivation. Now that's something I'm seeing more and more in my current work in child and youth mental health, but I did get a bit of a sample of it in generalist pediatrics. So school refusal and supporting the teenager or the child to go back to school. And there can be a lot of different things causing school anxiety and things like that, so I won't delve too much into it now. Something else that I started to see more towards the end of my experience in generalist peds was more difficulties around visual perception. And just quickly, visual perception is how our minds kind of make sense of what we're seeing. It's not necessarily anything to do with like our vision, like having 20/20 vision or anything to do with that. It's our ability to make sense of what we're seeing. And there's lots of different skills within visual perception. And so we would do a general kind of screening tool on visual perception. And if there was a big concern, then that would have prompted us to try and think about what particular areas of visual perception, for example, I'll put some here, they might be having trouble with. So I'm just wondering if I've missed anything. I'm just going to quickly read through my list. Shoelaces, self-care, motivation, and sensory preferences, toileting, handwriting, dressing, spatial awareness, organization and executive functioning, routines, transitioning, school motivation, concentration, attention, i.e. self-regulation, which also includes emotional regulation and cognition regulation, rigidity and flexible thinking, social skills and problem solving, sensory processing, feeding, fine motor strengthening, gross motor coordination, gross motor, oh my goodness, gross motor coordination, balance, strength, feeding, fine motor, yes, road safety, visual perception, early learning skills. And I'm sure there's much more that has escaped my mind, but that's just a general idea, and it's already gotten to 24 minutes of the things that you might work on as a generalist pediatric routine.